Today, I am spending time with a gentleman that I have known for many years. And it's a bit of a different take on the interviews because this is the first time I'm interviewing an author. His name is Shaun Fuchs, and he has quite an impressive CV in terms of education. He is a qualified school teacher, was a history teacher at Fourways High, went on to be the principal of the Crawford Colleges in College in Lone Hill. He has then been a managing director of the schools that run these institutions. And now he has released a book about, it's a story of pride, respect. You can see I've read it. I promise I have. It's a story of pride, respect, and leadership. It's called Fush and written by Shaun Fuchs. This is him on the front cover. And I wanted to talk to him today because after reading his book, I kind of realized that I had a different worldview to him and a different experience of the world. But also he's a man who has been through a lot, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about things like standing up to the status quo, things like having to share his sexuality with people, having to deal with rejection, having to deal with people who saw him in a specific light. There's even a little bit about terrorism in the book, I'll have you know. So we're going to be spending some time just talking about how he got through all of this. I'm going to hand over to Shaun Fuchs. Shaun Fuchs, welcome to this little Ready People interview session that I'm doing. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thanks, Clive. Nice to be your first author that you're interviewing.
I know. How does it feel to be a published author?
Oh, I've always tried to claim to be a published author, and now that I finally am, it's quite exciting. I got to get used to walking past exclusive books and seeing my book or my picture in the window. That's quite exciting. And it's nice. Friends sort of around the country in the bookstore, and then I'll take a photo and WhatsApp it through to me and say, "Oh, here's your book." And I don't send it to me. Buy the damn thing. Just buy it. Clear out the shelves.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's nice. It's nice. It's great to do to finally to have something published. I mean, you'll see on my social media page, I say every single one of us have a book in us. It's just a matter of actually sitting down and putting those memories and that journey and the thoughts into words.
Yeah, but there is also, I agree with you that we do have a book in us, but there's also something about getting it published. So that says quite a bit. So well done on that, because just because you write a book doesn't mean it's worthy of being published. But this is a book that is worthy of being published. What I loved about this book is that this is a book of stories. My feeling about stories is that our stories heal other people's stories. And a lot of what you speak about isn't saying, "Oh, you know, I'm just so amazing." Some of it does, and that's cool. It's worthy of that. But a lot of it is about saying, this is my story, and this is how I got over it, and this is how I dealt with it. One of the first things you speak about is obviously kind of growing up in a, I want to say rural area, but it wasn't really rural. It was just, you weren't in the suburban kind of mecca of Johannesburg. And then you moved to a school called Jeppe, which is also a school that I went to. And that was a school where you had to also kind of establish yourself. But you were dealing with stuff. Tell us a bit about what happens in the book around your story with Jeppe.
So Jeppe really was, from my standard 7 years, current grade 9, that I'd moved across to Jeppe, and my dad had always wanted us to go to Jeppe. So when we were taken out of Grenville in Rustenburg and put into Jeppe in standard 9, 1982, standard 7, 1982, yeah, that was, that was the reason, not that we were located nearby. My parents actually moved there. And yeah, my experience of Jeppe was great. I absolutely loved it.
So that's interesting. So I went to Jeppe, but I started years after you because I'm a lot younger than you. So what happened was, my experience of Jeppe was one filled. So I'm going to be honest here because your book is so transparent and honest. You are a gay man and have struggled with your sexuality and coming out, obviously, at school, like most of us have. And my experience of being a gay man at Jeppe was one filled with quite a lot of toxic masculinity where I was bullied. I wasn't a rugby guy. I was a drama guy. I was a debating and choir guy. So I fit into that stereotypical guy who doesn't fit in to the kind of masculine norm. You were going through a similar journey though, but you were able to present yourself in a different way within that. What was your experience of being a gay man or kind of coming to terms with your sexuality in a very, I mean, for those of you who don't know, Jake White, the Springbok rugby captain, Springbok rugby coach, he was a Jeppe boy and probably went around the same time you went, Shaun, but he was also my housemaster at school. It was a very masculine school. How did you develop a kind of a resilience or a way of dealing with who you were and who you had to be in the school?
The reality is we all go through the same thing. It doesn't matter what our sexuality is. You kind of go into puberty, you start developing an attraction for another person. For some people, it's the opposite sex, and for some people, it's the same sex. The difficulty that I found in the 1980s is there was no example of any gay people. So in terms of who I was and who I was starting to think who I was confused, because why was I falling in love with my best friend Dylan at the time? You know, falling in love with Dylan at the age of 14, 15, and you're completely confused, you know. So, but as I say in the book, it was the normal way any teenager at that point in time would feel about another human being. The confusion comes in is that everything around you associated with who you start realizing you are, that you are someone attracted to a member of the same sex, is toxic. So in other words, if anything's wrong, the association is always negative. So, you're such a fag. So you don't compliment someone by saying you're a fag. You're called a fag because you want to be derogatory to someone, or that he's so gay, or, you know, that's, and so those kind of things you start growing up with, and you start getting almost conditioned that being gay or being gay is negative. It's bad. It's associated with. It's not associated with anything positive. So that was probably the same thing that you were going through, and that any other gay kid, even today, sadly, sometimes is associated with. So that really I started struggling with, because for everything else, I was enjoying my teenage years. I was enjoying my experience at Jeppe. I had an amazing history teacher in Gail Mervis, who just motivated me to become a teacher. She was very positive. I had Dave Pitcan, who was my rugby coach, and who, ironically, if I had gone to him at that point in time and told him, he wouldn't have even blinked an eye. I mean, when we talk about it today, he just laughs. I mean, his wife will joke that most of his friends are gay. I mean, he does, you know, but I never knew that at that point in time, because it wasn't discussed, and you didn't know that sort of gay people existed. And as I say in the book, the only one I knew that existed was Liberace, and he had just died of HIV-related illnesses, you know, and then it was Rock Hudson. So everything about being gay was completely negative or toxic. And that was the biggest challenge that I had. Overcoming it, I don't think I overcame it, certainly not at school, because in the instances where I did try and approach it with friends of mine, the reaction was negative. There was not a positive reaction. The first positive reaction I get is going to the 702 crisis clinic when I was in my first year at JCE, and telling my best mate at the time, Wayne, that was the positive reaction that I got. So I don't think I overcame it. And I spent a lot of my time just being, inverted commas, a normal teenager, playing rugby, playing sport, going to the gym, but constantly being kind of in the state where you don't want a girlfriend, because that's not who you are. It's not natural. You know, it's like trying to write with your left hand when you're actually right-handed. You can't do it. It's not natural. It's quite straightforward. And I was trying to write with my left hand the whole time when I was actually right-handed, by trying to date girls, because my friends were dating girls, and I thought that's what I needed to do. But, you know, really liked their good-looking brothers.
Well, and I totally get that. I think it's one of the things that gay men are robbed of is, well, certainly great gay men who grew up in the 80s and 90s and prior to that, is that whole experience of being able to learn how to have relationships and date and your first kiss being exciting and something you share with people. And instead, we grew up in an era where we were, and I think it still exists, where we were surrounded by toxic masculinity, where there was an image that you had to portray if you were going to be portrayed as someone who was acceptable as a male and within a boys' school. What's interesting for me is that, and this is what I loved about the book, is your journey into then becoming an educator. The book speaks about it is that almost your struggle of being excluded created a very big need within you to create inclusion with you as by being an educator. And you speak about that in the book. One of the things that I'll read a paragraph, a little section from the book that was very powerful. You said, money, race, gender, and sexual preferences be damned. Everything about my outlook on education is centered around inclusivity.
I think it's interesting because what's happening now in the schools is exactly what I've spoken about at the start of my career, and that those comments. So this fireball that's erupting in schools currently is about inclusion, and inclusion is about that you can't have categories of inclusion. And I think that was my frustration all the time. Because inclusion is about human beings, and I think this is the simplicity of where we're at, is that we forget we're talking about human beings. And we lose perspective because we categorize ourselves too much on the type of human being. You are straight, you are gay, you are bi, you are trans. I mean, we can continue with a category all the way. So we even in sexuality start categorizing people into, And for me, it's not about that. It's about accepting people for being human beings. Yes, we can be frustrated with them. Yes, we can be angry with each other, but we have to treat each other as human beings. And I think that's what I've always insisted on doing in my classrooms, in my sports teams, in the schools that I've run. That's been a critical part for me. And I think that theme comes out quite strongly in the book.
It does. And you speak a lot about people who have there's a couple of students who speak about feeling safe to express their sexuality, write on their blazer, even to emblazon their, kind of what they were feeling or whatever it was. As an educator, now I come from a background of being very bullied, and I know my sister is a school teacher and she speaks about the problem of bullying in schools. As an educator who works so hard for inclusivity, how did you manage people who didn't demonstrate inclusivity? Whether that be, because my experience was there were teachers who didn't and there were pupils who didn't. And as an educator, as a headmaster, eventually someone as an MD, how did you go about it, and how would you advise someone who's saying, how do I make my classroom, my working space, my family more inclusive?
The end result is you need to create an environment that has a zero tolerance for any form of discrimination. So that's the end result. So you create that environment where if you discriminate, or if you bully, or if you're not, those are probably two good examples, but if you take the environment and you're doing those things, you are the exception. So that's the critical part. And when you become the exception, when you are the only bully, that sends a very strong message. The challenge is you have to create that environment. And that's the difficulty, because along the way, you've got to continuously educate people. And that's a journey, and that's a process that takes place. And I think that's quite important. So every talk you have, every discussion, how you behave, how you conduct yourself, the assemblies, It needs to be about inclusiveness. It needs to be about tolerance. It needs to be about mutual respect. And you continue to do that. And as you do that, so the environment that I was part of at Crawford College, Lone Hill, it was not just created by me. It was created by people who bought into the concept that inclusivity, that mutual respect, that tolerance was something they believed in. And the students believed in it. And for me, what was critical, you had the grade 12s absolutely loving the grade 8s. And they respected them. The grade 8 felt completely safe. I remember often having conversations with fathers who were coming from monastic schools who couldn't understand it. Yeah, but my son, shouldn't he carry the matrix suitcase? And I said, why? What must he carry it for? That's ridiculous. And I think you had to live it. For me, when I would go visit schools, or we'd be playing rugby or water polo or whatever, and I was headmaster at the time, and there'd be VIP parking and that, I refused. I'm not going to do that. Why must I be special because I'm the head of a school and I must suddenly get special parking and special this? And I used to love it when they had the special, the headmaster's little gazebo, which was plonked in the middle of a stand or whatever, and you would sit there and nod and shake. I refused. I used to stand on the side of the lines with the students, cheering and shouting and encouraging the players, whether it was netball or rugby, it doesn't matter. The point is you live that. By living that, they see that you're real. And the moment people see that you're real, they will buy into what you believe in. And I think that to me was important. So it was a journey. It wasn't just straightforward. It wasn't just easy. It was a process. And there was a lot of people involved in that, and people had to believe in it. It wasn't just me.
One of the things that you managed to do in your journey as an educator is you normalized inclusivity. One of the ways you normalized inclusivity, and going back to your sexuality, is that you speak very openly about you and your husband, and that you spoke very openly about the boys and the girls at school all knew that you were going to arrive at a function and it would be your husband or your partner on your arm at that time. And I think that normalizing is very powerful. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think it is. And I'm always cautious of the word normal, because we want to be normal. What is normal? Your normal's probably very different to my normal, but sure. I understand the concept of normal in terms of just make it natural. Just make it natural that it's just something that happens. The reality of my students through the years accepting or understanding who Gordon was in my life was wonderful, because they loved it and they loved him, and never ever did he ever face any kind of negativity from any of the students. In fact, to this day, they still visit. We travel overseas, we see them around the world, we stay with them in their homes with their families, their kids know us and everything. So I think from that part, you just need to live your life and be a good person, and just be, if you're happy and you're in a relationship that kind of is positive, I think people will accept that. And no, accept's a wrong word. I don't want to use accept. People understand it. People will relate to it. They don't have to accept it. I don't care about that, but they'll relate to it. We're not hurting anyone. We're not threatening anyone. It's just me.
But you must have had resistance to being open and out as a headmaster at a school.
Tragically, the resistance I've had has been from religious people. And not all religious people, because there are some amazing, wonderful people who are religious. I'm not religious at all. But again, I completely respect that people are. The same way respect me and understand where I'm coming from. And it was from the religion. I mean, I mentioned in the book, the one family, they ran, husband and wife ran a God TV, or it was a religious channel or something like that, who were completely threatened and completely unhappy about the fact that I was employing gay teachers, and the exact words to me were, well, we're okay with you because you don't look gay. I mean, I don't know what gay looks like, but you don't look gay. But these other teachers are very effeminate or very camp, or they're very gay, and it's not setting a good example for our children. I told them where to get stuffed and to get lost. I'm not interested in that. And they took their kids out of the school. Good for them, you know. So you do, yes, you do find resistance, and often you'll find resistance that you don't know about. So that's probably the worst form, because it's you never know about it. You don't know how to respond to it. You can't respond to it. But it's that, it's that gossip and that really destructive kind of conversations that are being had that are ignorant.
Why choose to be transparent and honest and vulnerable about your story when it would be easier not to be?
By coming out and by being out there and saying, listen, this is who I am, it would make it easier for other people who couldn't. So whether it's take the bullet or whatever it is, if I'm hopefully getting across what I'm trying to explain, I was very comfortable to take the bullet and to say, this is who I am. And actually, it's quite normal. It's quite okay. And there are lots of us like this. And not everyone has to come out. So for me, putting it out there is to say, this is who we are. It's the joy of my book, I think, is in 20 years' time, people are going to read it, hopefully sooner. But in 20 years' time, when people read it, they'll go, was this even an issue? Really? What is this? And that's where we need to get to. But we need to remember the journey we've taken to get there. That's so important.
What you're talking about is acceptance, and I'm looking at your book here as well. And it's in the book you talk about the 5 stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And your teen years were spent grieving something I never had, but you got to this point of acceptance. And I think that that's what's so powerful in your story, is this point of acceptance. One of the interviews I did previously with a psychologist, she said, what you resist resists back. And I think it's so important. What you demonstrate in the book is always an acceptance of where you're at. It doesn't mean that you stay where you're at, but you do work very hard to say, this is where I'm at, I'm going to make it work. And I think there's such power in that acceptance.
For me, it was about writing this, telling the stories. And what was quite interesting is as you start finalizing and working the book, you see these common threads coming through. You start understanding, you actually understand yourself a lot better. Sometimes when I read, I'm like, geez, do I actually do that? And so that message is almost a natural message, I think, that has come out from the book.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it is a powerful, you say on the cover, it's a story of pride, respect, and leadership. And I think it's a lot more than that. For me, you always read a book from whatever frame of reference you come from and what meaning you ascribe to it. And for me, it was a very powerful book about acceptance. And you spoke earlier about the relationships that you have, and you speak about it in the book about the relationships you have with so many of the students that you taught. And so the acceptance wasn't based on, I'm just going to be your teacher, but the acceptance was that I'm going to get alongside your humanity and be a part of your life. And some of them, they haven't been able to get rid of you.
They haven't, and they've been wonderful. And I was talking to someone this past week and just saying that, honestly, not a day goes by where I do not get a WhatsApp, a call, a message, something from a past student of, suppose it's been 30 years of education, but every single day I get something. I can't remember the last time I never received something like that. And it's from, students that are friends now that are around the world. And they've been so excited about the book and have obviously been buying. They've been the biggest, my biggest market at this point, and hopefully it gets expanded out there because I think that's a good story.
And although we've spoken a lot about the sexuality aspect of it, for me, what was also very interesting about it is the aspect of education. Firstly, I didn't realize how much of the educational world was political, how much politics is involved in it. You do realize that it is a career that you have to navigate quite carefully. But it is also a very powerful indication of the power that educators have in children's lives. And I think sometimes educators get the raw end of the brunt, especially from parents who have such high expectations, not realizing the level of passion and the level of skill and the level of responsibility that a lot of teachers walk into their jobs with. Especially, I mean, we are talking about, you do teach in schools that have an element of privilege. So,
Mm.
you know, I just want to contextualize that. So,
Mm.
but you do speak from a place of where this was more than just a job. I think anyone, although you hustled on the side and you talk about many businesses that you've run, I don't think anyone becomes a teacher because they want to become a teacher, because no one wants to earn that salary. I
Mm.
think you become a teacher because you need to be a teacher. And that's also what I got out of the book, is your need to really be very good at getting to people's minds and hearts.
Yeah, I'm currently unemployed at the moment, and the reason I'm unemployed is because I chose to exit in a system as a managing director of an international group of schools, because for me, and it's not the organization, it's me, it's my choice, was to say, this is not why I became a teacher. This doesn't make me happy. I'm no longer inspiring people. I'm no longer making a difference in people's lives. So I had the salary, I had everything, you know, that you would probably want in a job, but I wasn't getting the fulfillment. And so you are 100% right when you say you become a teacher because you need to, it's in your DNA. And I say that to people all the time when I used to have my, meet the managing director, and I'd have the induction for new staff. And I'd say, it's in your DNA, and think about it. Think of, and even to yourself, think of the person that inspired you the most in your life. Probably 10 out of 10, if not 9 out of 10 people, it was a teacher.
Mm.
Probably. Okay. Probably 10 out of 10 people that inspired you, that really motivated you as a human being, was a teacher somewhere along the way in your schooling. And you will remember them. You'll remember their idiosyncrasies. You'll remember how they walked, how they laughed, what they did, everything that made you happy. And you've probably taken some of those traits with you along your own journey in your career and your life. And that's the power of a teacher. No money can buy that. No money can buy that. And I've been there. I've walked it. I've talked it. No money can buy that. One of the comments I make to teachers is to say that the sadness of our profession is you never get to see your end product. Mm-hmm. And I challenged parents when I was still a headmaster a couple of years ago, and I wrote an article on this in the newsletter. And I'd said to them, I challenged them, I said, go back to the teacher that changed your life or influenced you and write them a note, email them, get hold of them, send them a message and just say thank you. You will not believe how powerful it was. And a lot of parents did it. I did it myself at that point in time. And it's so powerful.
And sometimes teachers don't realize the life course and the potential that they can put you on. And I don't think parents realize why they need to get alongside the teachers so much more, because of the impact teachers have on their children's lives and shaping and forming them. And we should be encouraging that rather than saying it's the teacher's fault, it's the school's fault, which I think happens a lot in schools these days.
Too much. It's too often. That's the problem.
Yeah. Your book, I want to recommend that people read it. Now, I'm going to be very honest. When somebody, especially somebody I know, says that they write a book, I usually cringe and I go, oh my God. And I've been given a few manuscripts to read where I had to say, sure, the spelling is very good in the book. You're very good at grammar. But this is a really phenomenal read, and it's a really accessible read that and it isn't just about LGBT. It's a story for me about acceptance and acceptance of people as human beings, and also not being prepared to just stay where you are, but being prepared to actually stand up and say, this is my story and this is my truth, whether that be that I want to be a leader, whether that be that I want to be someone who changes people's lives from a formative age. So Shaun, I want you to tell me if there was a kid watching this right now that said, we've just been through COVID, we've just been through all of this shit that's been going on in our lives at the moment, but said, I want to learn to be a stronger human being. I want to learn to one day be able to stand up and speak my truth, whatever that is, like you did. What advice would you give to someone?
I think there's probably a few things. One, never let anyone intimidate you. And I've lived by that my whole life. I think I've made a comment previously to say the only person who ever intimidated me was my father, but in a positive way, not in a negative way at all. But no one's intimidated me. It doesn't matter who it is. Not when I was in the army, not when I was at school, not ever. And that wasn't something that I was. That wasn't something that that I think I was taught. I think there was something that I, from an early age, I accepted, and I understood that every single person has their issues. Every single person is different. So the person you think is so amazing and is so, ferocious or fierce or intimidating is actually not. It's just another person. And don't put them into a category, and don't allow anyone, never be intimidated by anything. And I think that in itself builds up confidence. It allows you to kind of get out there, and it's absolutely fine to fail. I've failed so many times, and I'm still failing on things, but you've got to learn from it, and you've got to understand that it's okay to fail. And as much as it might be a cliche, you can only learn if you fail, but it's true. You have to fail, because none of us are perfect. I can assure you, no one on this planet has not failed at something. So it's absolute. Don't be intimidated. Absolutely fine to fail, and just look for something that's going to make you happy. I always say, what is your purpose? If you've got a purpose, you can live for anything. But if you haven't got a purpose, and if that purpose is not making you happy, get out. I made that decision when I left my last job. I no longer had a purpose, and I wasn't happy. I got out. My life has changed.
I think that's amazing. And I want to end off because I always like to have the last word. But what I want to say is that what this book reminds me of is the power of your story. Your story as a human being is valid. Your story as a human being, when you read these books, these stories are not, I went out and I climbed Mount Everest stuff. They are, I just did something small that made a difference in someone's life or in my life. And I think that that's what we need to remember as we grow older, and even when we're young, is that your story is valid, your truth is valid, there is power in your story, and actually your story heals other people's stories. So Shaun, I want to say thank you for sharing your story with us. I think it's a beautifully written book. It's a glimpse into your life and little pockets and moments that are very special, and very special that you let us into those moments. I got a lot out of the book. I'm sure a lot of people are going to read it, but I hope a lot of people got stuff out of this interview. I think you've said some very powerful stuff as well. And thank you for writing the book and for putting your story and vulnerability out there. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, Clive.